What's up, everybody? This is episode number 28 of Rolling with Reason. I am Will Gerals, and I am a busy guy. I normally have a co host. His name is John, but he's not with me for this episode. For the sake of keeping things going and rolling as the schedule that I hope everyone loves for us to be consistent with, I'm doing another solo episode. So, with that being said, what's up? This is probably going to be as maybe treacherous as the last one as far as me navigating a conversation with myself. So, with that being said, I guess to touch on this week, as a follow up from last week, I have a couple follow ups for the things that we were talking about last week, but some big Brazilian Jiu Jitsu things to talk about, which a lot of people I think that listen to this podcast are Jiu Jitsu oriented. The Arnold's is coming up, so that's very cool. For anybody who doesn't know what the Arnold's is, that is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, grappling tournament for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu within Ohio. So it's a big deal. There's a lot of teams that compete, a lot of very good competitors that come in from out of states, even to come compete at this big event. And it's very cool. I feel very fortunate to be close enough to be able to compete in it with what feels like arm's reach. So that's very cool and exciting. So that's coming up for anybody who is listening to the podcast and is going to be there. Make sure you let me know and just kind of, shout out the comments that you don't leave. Leave some comments. I want the comments. Please leave the comments so I can know whether or not I'm absolutely butchering this thing as far as posting it and editing it and all that amazing stuff that I love to do. To touch on what I think is awesome, that's also in conjunction with the Arnold's, is I think I touched on it a little bit last week, was the Octopus 2.0 guard that Craig Jones just put out. It's very, very good, I think, and I think it's going to have a lot of merit and the longevity of how people and when people are using it. I heard somebody compare it recently to this move called the chair or something along those lines, and I think it has some vague resemblances in it. And to be quite honest, I think that it would be hard for me to really understand where that's coming from just because I have a hard time just remembering the Octopus 2.0 by itself. Now, I do use it, and that's not to say that I'm forgetting it. It's just there's a lot of different names, and there's a lot of things that Craig says in the videos, and there's just a lot of jiu-jitsu out there. It could kind of be the same thing, but maybe it's slightly named different, so I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, it doesn't change the fact that I still think it's a very, very good guard to learn and to use. There's a couple very good sweeps, depending on, or reversals, whatever you want to call them. Doesn't matter. And conceptually, to me, they're the same. But that are kind of off this series of movements. So I think it's going to be very good. I think I actually think I'm going to see a lot of it up at the Arnold's. Now, whether or not it's in particular in my bracket, I don't know. Seems like the heavier guys don't tend to lean to this kind of area, but it could be something that is prominent in Arnold's this year, which is coming up. I believe it's in late March. So that means we still pretty much have the whole month of February to get any competitions in that we want to get in. So maybe that's going to be some IBJJF competitions, but we're still filling out the ankle, which is kind of unfortunate. So this is kind of I suppose, a shout out to the Off Grid Grappler, which is the other channel that I have on YouTube. So if you want to see any of that content or check any of that stuff out, it will be hosted and posted. Does it? Oh, anyways, the content is up on that channel. I also put all that stuff together myself. So any support or comments as far as what I could be doing better, that sort of thing. Right now, it just seems like posting, but yeah, any feedback would be great. It'd be awesome. It'd just be awesome to get some good feedback. But yeah, I think we'll see a lot of the Octopus Guard 2.0 played up at the Arnold's. And I'm curious to see how that goes for people at a high intensity pace as such. That tournament is hosted by Grappling Industries, they're pretty good about hosting their stuff, and I feel like they have a pretty good system down. They've had some rough patches over the last couple years as far as audio is concerned and kind of just handling of the athletes for their matches and stuff. I think it's inevitable that times for your matches vary substantially, right? That's something that's kind of unavoidable with the mass amount of people and then the variances of matches, right? We assume that, 3 to 5 minute matches will last the complete duration of that 3 to 5 minutes, but in all reality, it could be less than that. And, if you multiply that by, let's say, 10 matches and there was a 1 minute difference, that's a 10-minute difference now between your match time. Now, if you multiply that by another 10, you can see where those minutes start to add up a lot. That's 100 minutes, right? So, over an hour, hour and a half. So, something to be mindful of, I guess, if you're going to be competing over there, the times are not always consistent as they shouldn't be, and it's a hard thing to track. Let's move on to what I think is going to be a very good February, provided that my ankle heals up properly. I definitely want to do some IBJJF competitions. I think there's going to be a lot of room for me to do those this year, and I'd really like to hit that really hard and really just try and hone in my kind of competitor aspect of my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I'm excited to do a lot of that this year. I'm excited to see where it takes me, just as far as creating the content and just putting it out there for everybody to see kind of what that's like, I guess, if you kind of embrace that sort of lifestyle, I suppose, is what it would be. But yeah, so that's very cool. I'm very interested in that and I'm ready to take that on. So I'm excited about that. So just to kind of reiterate over top of that, tell you guys about it. Um, I guess something worth noting is kind of where I'm at with the programming stuff. I talked about it a little bit last week. And so I've been making a lot of headway and it feels very good. It's feeling very, very rewarding. I don't know. I know that me and John had talked about it a good bit, but kind of this fascination about learning and how we're progressing is as far as at the capacity as we're able to, right? Because it's a different thing for everybody, but there's a process of learning to learn, and I feel like last week conceptually I hit on a lot of stuff that was really needed for the web development framework that I'm using called, excuse me, Django. And so something very cool about that is that there's different versioning kind of metrics for application frameworks like that you use to build websites and stuff. And so I kind of spent some time, of course, in conjunction with AI, trying to figure out and understand this thing that I was working with and looking at. And it turns out that it was something super simple and it totally made sense. And that's one of the beautiful things about going through these processes and doing this stuff. There's kind of a pattern that's like a revolving door. And so the processes are kind of the same every time that you figure something out. You just realize that ultimately it's entangled to a data structure, probably inevitably of the framework, and then you just kind of need to understand why and what is where it is. And that just comes from reading the docs, which for me is still kind of hard. It's something I could get better at. Docs standing for documentation, if you didn't know. But then the other thing that you could do too as well is you could just read the actual source code of the framework to try and understand where things are derived from. And so that helps me tremendously. I find substantially more than kind of just reading the documentation. I will ask AI for kind of reasoning behind what I'm working on, why it is the way that it is, and then I also use that in conjunction with kind of sifting through the source code and understanding why I'm passing what I'm passing. But there's so one of the crazy things about using, I suppose, a framework as big as the Django is like it can be kind of easy to lose sight of where you're getting your data from or how you're going to process it according to what would be considered best practices. So there's this idea of kind of like containerization, and it kind of ties into what I would call a separation of concerns. And so you kind of create these smaller apps that kind of run and process the data, and then that will end up coming back into the web app in itself. So if I want to display specific data, I can pull it and I can use it according to that kind of format where I just pull it from a file where all the logic is contained. That way I'm not cluttering the files that handle the processing and where the data comes from. Intriguing, something very cool that I'm very happy with, and I'm excited to see just kind of how my mind and my programming skills kind of elevate with that, because I've noticed too that that kind of lets me get back into my what I feel like are my Python roots, back to where I'm just kind of building stuff based off of things that I've seen or things that I've done with the previous books that I've worked in, or book I should say, with the Python Crash Course by Eric Mathis. There was a lot of stuff there that I learned, and I've been wanting to incorporate that stuff into the development interface and interactions, but I didn't quite understand how that was going to work. And now I realize that these kind of sub files or files that reside within this folder are associated with just kind of like importing and running processes associated with it. So it's very cool, and I'm very excited for that portion of getting back into what is kind of like programming, I guess to some degree, because when you use a framework so big, you are programming to an extent, but you're really just trying to learn the ins and outs of kind of how, I suppose, the web environment works and what you need to be doing and that sort of thing. So with that being said, it's nice getting to the point to where I feel like I'm starting to understand that stuff, and so it's putting me in a position to where now I can start maybe focusing a little more on the data handling services, uh, creation processes that I really do enjoy. Now, it's not to say that in HTML pages and stuff, there's not a creation process there, but that process has been a little hindered for me just because those are HTML. That's HTML language, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And it's a very good language. It's very intuitive. It's very simple, but there's a lot of different tags and there's some formatting stuff I need to know. Not being somebody who's been very versed inside of HTML and I haven't worked with it that much. I mean, I have, I suppose, within the last, you know, 3 months or so, but I haven't worked with it a bunch. So there's a lot of little things that I'm learning there and trying to understand how to work with that. And not to mention, there's kind of an abstraction. So there's kind of this area now in each side of HTML that's for what we call CSS, and then there's HTML. And so the CSS is kind of how you style your HTML stuff. So there's a lot of stuff there I need to learn in that regard, and that's super creative, but it does kind of take away, and it's a separation from the framework as well as the Python data handling service provided type of things that I can do within that framework. And so those are kind of two separate things. So I'm kind of picking that up and learning that as I go. And then there's a whole other slew of stuff that just comes along right after this. So as far as like using you could use a library called Bootstrap, which a lot of people use for styling their web pages. And then you could also use something like or not like, but you have to deploy the actual web app, and so that's a whole thing within of itself. They have this software called Docker, which is where you kind of containerize the OS. So in this case, it would be something like Ubuntu. That's kind of a really funny word, but that is a operating system specific to server handling and running. And so you can kind of have this Docker file that has an Ubuntu image in it, and then you can run something like Postgres on it, and that's because the actual system, maybe that you want to run the server off of, doesn't actually have a Postgres database kind of application interface thing. So you have to kind of work your way around that and figure that out, as well as you can also put a container on there for the web application itself. So I believe the web application interacts and intermingles, communicates with that other container that resides within that Docker file. And that's kind of vaguely a a pre-conceptual look into what is going to be the deployment process for me. And so I'm excited about that. That's new to me. And I'm making some upgrades to some home system related stuff, but I don't want to get too deep into that, right? But I'm very excited for what the future has to bring as far as putting this stuff together and making something that functions and works. And I'm excited to show that to people. I'm excited to show that to you guys. I would love to have one, like a website specific to the podcast itself. So I'm just thrilled. I think that stuff is coming along really nice. Even the process of adding and using images in conjunction with a database is kind of its own thing in and of itself. And so learning to do that and learning to work with that, it's just phenomenal. It's a whole process. And so this is kind of, I suppose, touching back into what I was talking about, the efficiency of learning. I don't know if you guys can tell, but by the way that I'm talking, there's a lot of stuff that I've been working on that I just feel like it's really sticking in my head, and it feels really nice because there's moments when this stuff can feel a little overwhelming, I guess. But you have to be naive, you have to be naive and know that you're going to learn it. It just takes a little bit of time. And so, with that being said, it just feels like the more that you put the time in and you work with the stuff and you're writing stuff down, it's easier for it to cognitively click for you. And so, at least that's how it's been in my case. And I wish I had some better kind of orientation towards or answers to how I could do that more proficiently, more often. But I think it just comes down to the consistency. Like, I feel like the consistency is the biggest key, and something that's been helping me a lot recently is writing stuff down. I'm writing it down as I learn new concepts to understand them better, so I can formulate my words onto a sheet of paper. And I think it's helped me in tremendous ways that I didn't realize it was going to. I am currently working on doing big things as far as the bedtime is associated. So I'm going to kind of go into a rabbit hole here. Again, all this stuff that I'm saying, this isn't researched. I am not from any college with any type of degree. Not that that really means much to me. I just enjoy doing what I'm doing. But to everybody out there, everything I'm saying isn't something you should take quite literally and kind of just straight blindly incorporate into your life. If you have new stuff that you kind of derive ideas from, when I'm talking about, maybe go talk to a healthcare professional. It's probably definitely recommended over anything that I say. But I was listening to the Andrew Huberman podcast. The Huberman podcast, I believe, is exactly what it's called. Not too long ago, and it was one of the earlier episodes. He was talking a lot about sleep, and so there's kind of this fascination that I didn't realize, I suppose I had, that exist with our eyeballs, our eyeballs in conjunction with sunsets and sunrises, and how it works with our internal circadian rhythm. That kind of clock that tells us, oh, hey, it's time to wake up, and oh, hey, it's time to go to bed. And so there's something I think to be said about the different chemical releases within our body, things like cortisol and things like melatonin. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about melatonin. Melatonin is the chemical that's released that kind of lets your body know and feel tired, like, hey, it's time to go to bed. And the cortisol is kind of the opposite effect of that. It kind of wakes up. When you're waking up, it's kind of like a release of this area that sits kind of right above your kidney. And so those are two of the processes that are highly involved with this kind of sleep cycle. But one of the astonishing things is I think the importance and the practicality of light in association with that thing. So we wake up right in the mornings if you have a regular 9 to 5 job, and you kind of wake up like I don't know, around 8 or so, 7, usually when the sun comes up. Your eyeballs are receiving through, I believe, transmitters. I forget what they're called, but nonetheless, those transmitters kind of communicate with your body to let it know to release those chemicals. And so in the instance of when the sun's coming up, there's a lot of blue light. There's a lot of sun coming out. You want to start this process in the morning of, hey, like, it's time to wake up. And so one of the best ways to do that is to go outside, kind of stand in the sun. Don't look at the sun, just stand in the sun, or be outside getting enough that blue light to kind of start that process. Now, to be fair, here in Ohio, it's extremely frigid right now. I believe it's been in the teens, if not the single digits now, for what feels like the last couple weeks. It has been brutal, but you still want to get outside, and you really want to kind of soak that up to kind of start that process. But the thing here worth noting is that there was so again, this is Andrew Huberman. I regard him as probably an extremely intellectual individual. He was talking about the process of when you go to wake up, and he has a fellow colleague, I believe, where he works, and he said that it is 50 times less effective to be indoors, like, and be receiving the sunlight and or the blue light coming from outside. So what does that mean? That means if you're just sitting in front of a window, it's not going to quite work as well, I think, as you want it to. So actually get outside. Actually start that process by going outside and getting that process. Now, granted, some of us, in my case, wake up super early before the sun ever comes up. And there's caveats to that, right? There's probably little tricks we can play on our brains in association with that to kind of wake us up in the morning and start that process off. I personally have been using the Hatch 3. It's been working really well for me as far as the mornings go. That's predominantly because when you wake up in the morning, you want some type of light, and it just feels way more natural for me to have a sunrise that's working off of what is um, off of the Hatch 3. It has like a preset timer that I can set up and use. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily right. It's not enough of the light that I need, I'm sure, but that's kind of what I've been using recently for me, and it's been working pretty well. To kind of move into the next thing, I would say is the nighttime portion, right? So this kind of melatonin release that, we always get told to, if you're having sleep problems, maybe just go get some melatonin, which is actually, I believe, a hormone, which is kind of crazy. And you can just grab it off of the counters at any local, like drugstore, I suppose, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to get a prescription from your doctor. And the crazy thing is, there was a study done, and I don't remember the study. Of course, I'm kind of just paraphrasing the knowledge that I gained from listening to Huberman's podcast. And there is a variable, like a wide variable range of what is supposedly given by each pill or capsule in conjunction with the melatonin that's on the bottles. Like, it's not regulated to an extent that the actual amount designated is within a tolerance for the melatonin. And that's a big deal, I suppose, if you want to be consistent with putting a hormone in your body and then fall asleeping at the right time. But again, talk to your healthcare professionals or associates to kind of learn, or see what works for you and what they think is going to work best for you. I am by no means telling anybody to go out and not buy melatonin now. If you've been buying melatonin, I'm sure there's plenty of scenarios where people need it and it is more regulated, but I don't know that. I'm just basing it off of the information that, again, I'm just paraphrasing. So, but to touch on why this process is important, and maybe you don't want to put a variable amount within your body, there's kind of a timer and kind of a clock. And so there's these things called, I believe, adrenal receptors. And so that's kind of like, oddly enough, caffeine blocks your adrenal receptors, which is kind of like an energy bar. And so those adrenal receptors start out with a particular amount of energy, and as the day goes on, it becomes less, less, and less, and less. And then once it gets to a super small amount, then it's like, oh, it's time to go to bed. And so, especially if you're taking in the sunlight, you're kicking off this process where you're releasing the melatonin correctly and consistently, right? If you're not taking variable amounts over the counter or from any shelf, I suppose, not over the counter. And so now you're kind of, your body's working um, synergistically, I believe would be a good term, to try and facilitate this sleep process. And I think that's very important in terms of recovery for jujitsu and just for day-to-day cognitive abilities. So to tie this back into the whole learning process and this kind of whole idea of just trying to stay consistent with recovery for muscle stores, for working out or doing jujitsu, or just trying to perform cognitively the best that you can and learning proficiently at whatever it is that you're doing, I think sleep is probably a crucial element that is directly tied to that. So the sort of stuff, it's stuff that I take very seriously. I'm trying to really evaluate rigorously as much as I can, even though I have the worst possible, probably, drink to be drinking energy drinks. I'm not demonizing them. I'm just saying, in terms of caffeine blocking those receptors, I'm sure it probably messes up that quote unquote energy meter to some extent. Maybe it's not particularly the caffeine. Maybe caffeine's a wonderful kind of prescription thing, or not prescription, non-prescription supplement is the word I'm looking for that you could use and have no problems. But again, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not giving anybody advice in that regard. I'm just saying what's working for me, and I think you guys should maybe think about looking into and seeing what works for you. But yeah, I think that stuff's critical. I think it's super important, especially in association, again, with just training and recovery and with this whole process of life, I suppose. We sleep for an astronomical amount of time throughout our life. And, why would you degrade or degrade why would you willingly accept a less than optimal sleep pattern or sleep cycle? It's a very interesting thing. I think it's maybe one of those subconscious things that ties in through all of our life, through the rest of our life. So just making sure that you're kind of being aware of that sort of stuff that maybe can really help you, I think is super important. The next thing that we can touch on or talk about is the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's getting very good. He just got moved to a political prison, at least one of them associated with the Soviet Union at the time, and he ends up being cellies or a cellmate with a guy who was very close to Lenin. He was a revolutionary guy, and it's just very interesting. It's very fascinating, and the part that I just left off on was the emperor portion. And what's crazy to me is the kind of drastic differences between these other camps or labor areas or prisons in comparison to the political one, because even though they were treated as heinously as they were still treated astronomically better than what they were inside of the other prisons. But that's not to say that it was actually good at all, because in all reality, it wasn't. It's just interesting how there was a huge comparison difference between before and after. Of course, there's sleep deprivation, which is ironic, right? We were just talking about sleep and the crucial aspect of sleep in our lives, and these guys are being deprived of it. But there's kind of a famine, right? And they're starving. Essentially, they get next to nothing. But it depends on who the political prisoner is and kind of if they can get more food in and that sort of thing. So it's just fascinating to see how horribly people were treated at a point in time that wasn't all too long ago. And again, this kind of ties into, I think, the way that the inner systems work today and just kind of looking at them. It's not to say that they're directly correlated, but I think there's kind of some extrapolation there to be looked at kind of in today's society. And that's a very vague and very broad statement, but I think that looking at it, it gives me a perspective, and I think in comparison to very vague statistics, and it's very interesting in that regard. Um, but moving right along, I've been using DaVinci Resolve to edit and facilitate these podcasts. And if you guys checked out episode 27 of Rolling with Reason, you'll know we had a very cool, interesting looking background. So I used AI to help me generate that cool background with a pre-existing image. And so there's some cool processes going on there and some specific kind of things I had to do to get it work the way that it did, especially in conjunction with the video editing software that I'm using. And so it's kind of something that I'm getting into a lot, especially with the photography and stuff. And you're probably even curious as to how I was maybe able to obtain the different kind of shots or kind of have these things within it. And so there's a whole process of stuff that goes on there, and I find it extremely fascinating. It's another one of those creative outlets or processes that I kind of get to do like once a week. That is my hobby, and I enjoy vigorously. I just enjoy it a lot. And so, with that being said, if you guys ever have any questions or want some information, I'm sure we could get together and, figure some stuff out, and maybe we could put something together for you, because I'm extremely flexible and portable in that way, as far as being able to, allot time for something like the DaVinci Resolve and kind of video shooting, recording, editing, lighting, all that stuff. This is very cool, and I enjoy it a lot. So, if there's something that you guys want done or you want to look into, I'm sure we could could look some stuff over. But that's enough of that. I feel like I'm promoting myself. That's very weird. I don't normally do that. Um, I've been training up at a gym recently called Super Systems. BJ Nelson is the guy that has been running that. It's a phenomenal gym, exceptional grapplers in there. He's very good. Just got back from Europe. I think he did very good in Europe. And so I've been training up there a lot recently, and things have been going exceptional there. And I'm kind of curious to see how the future goes as far as incorporating or maybe bringing that kind of atmosphere into the podcast or into my channel, Off Grid Grappler, or any of that stuff. So that's been going phenomenal, and yeah, schedule's kind of getting ironed out in conjunction with sleep, and programming is going great. But of course, I'm busy as always, and so it's unfortunate we can't have John here. But I think it might be something that end up we figure out something maybe like video calls or something along those lines, or maybe just this is going to be the detriment of the solo or the duo podcast what becomes the solo podcast. I'm not sure. There's a lot going on there. And so, yeah, but with that set aside, I think this is going to conclude this one. I know this was another shorter podcast, but I'm just like riffing here and I'm just letting it loose. I didn't write anything down. I'm just kind of filling you guys in on what my week's like and what the day to day is kind of like, I suppose. It's just a lot of information and building and creativeness and programming, and then jujitsu, a bunch of jujitsu, because that's what a curious uh, jujitsu oriented guy does. He just does jujitsu and then he does all of this other stuff that he loves, and life just keeps getting better. And, provided that the ankle heals up, you guys will probably see me competing at the Arnolds. I'm sure I'll be talking about the Arnolds. It's a phenomenal event, and I'm super excited to see what that brings. And I just hope, health being permitted as well as it needs to be, and everything going as smooth as I want it to. We're going to compete. We're going to have a great time. We're going to have a blast. And even for the other competitions that come up in February that I haven't quite ironed out yet, um, I'm excited. I'm just excited for that stuff. I hope you guys are excited for it as well. Um, Again, if you guys haven't checked it out, check out Off Grid Grappler. I have a couple videos posted there. I had a blast making those videos as well. It's definitely different than this kind of content. It's more of like a vlogging style thing. Of course, this channel is called Rolling with Reason. And if you guys enjoy this content, make sure you let me know in the comments, and sometimes I put some polls up. So if there's any polls down there, make sure you give some feedback on those. And man, I hope you guys are having a great start to your year. My year has been starting off very busy, but very efficient and very productive, and I'm happy about that. So, without further ado, this is going to conclude this episode of Rolling with Reason. I hope you guys had a blast listening to this, and I hope you guys tune in to next week's episode, which who knows what that's going to have in store. Peace.